So this article is from The Street. The countries with the most American expats. Okay, I always wondered about that. You know, we see like the Philippines shows up, Thailand shows up, but it's like, where do most Americans go if they want to stretch their retirement dollars, or just want to get out? Just want to leave the U.S. There's a guy there. That looks like a nice retirement, right? Sitting in a bamboo raft. Okay. Why do Americans move abroad? Mostly for love or money? That's according to a study by HireAHelper, a moving resources site, which found that around 24% of American expats move to pursue a romantic relationship. The cost of living abroad was also considered a benefit before moving by 53% of American expats surveyed by Internations, a networking site for expats, which also determined that 23% of those surveyed are retired. The U.S. State Department estimates that 10 million Americans are living outside the U.S., while the United Nations estimates 3.2 million. Despite the difference, both entities have tracked an increase in expats since 1999. The Social Security Administration noted a 40% increase in the number of retirees drawing their Social Security overseas, according to CNBC report, which says affordable health care and better weather are key factors for those retiring abroad. Other top reasons for Americans to move to a different country include better salary, better work-life experience, and to search for a more meaningful career, according to a report by Randstad, a global HR consultancy. Where do all of these Americans go? Mostly Mexico, it turns out. To find the countries with the most American expats, HireAHelper used the International Migrant Stock 2019 statistics series produced by the UN, only considering countries where there were at least 1,000 Americans. So if you have like 950 Americans, you're not counted in this. These are the countries with the most American expats. Number 1, Mexico. Look at that. You see a nice beach there. And the boat's not too far from the shore. 762,290 Americans. Wow. That's like 3/4 of a million right there. Not bad. Getting close to a million, right? Look how colorful that looks. Percent of Americans abroad, 27.7% of the entire group. Famous attraction, Xcaret Park in Cancun and Riviera Maya. There. That lady sure looks relaxed in her hat and bikini. 2, Canada. Isn't that surprising? You would think, who would go up to Canada? It gets so cold up there. Number 2 is Canada. Well, they got a national health care system too. So if you reach a certain age and you don't want to be messing around with what's going on here, I guess Canada is the place to go. You don't have to deal with all the stuff here, all these different insurance. Okay, this is Toronto. I've been in that building. A tower. Percent of Americans abroad, 9.8%. Famous attractions. Montmorency Falls in Quebec. Okay, well, a few hours drive, you can see the great Niagara Falls. Very impressive. I never heard of this. Montmorency Falls. Mont is for mountain in Quebec. 3. The United Kingdom. Who would think? The United Kingdom. Yep. If you like walking on the left side of the road and driving on the left side, that's fine. 215,915 Americans, United Kingdom. Look at those nice little quaint streets. Right? Percent of Americans abroad there, 7.9%. This is out of the total. Famous attraction, Stonehenge on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, England. Stonehenge, look at those stones. And in this picture I see a rainbow right there, rainbow. Germany, number 4. Who would have thought it? Yep, I was in Germany once, many years ago. Very, 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 very clean. I don't know about now, but it was one of the cleanest places I ever visited. You know, it was kind of scary coming from New York, where people throw garbage and all kinds of stuff in the sidewalk. At least back then, you know. Now I think it's cleaner now. To see you walking in Germany, you're afraid. You drop something in the wrong place. I think that's probably why the king of Thailand, he likes living in Germany, because Germany is so clean. If you ever walk down Nana in Bangkok, wow, different. And I'm kind of sidetracking here, but some years ago, when the new king, you know, when he took over from his father, and he came on the throne, all of a sudden they had all this clean up, you know. Nana used to be very, very different. And all the sidewalk vendors and so forth, cluttering, selling food, cooking on the sidewalk, pots open and so forth and that and that. And from what I heard, I don't know if it's true, his father had no problem with that, you know. His father believed people need to make a living. And if they need to cook at the sidewalk, sell food, so be it. But he apparently is different. He believes, no. We need to get some order here. So when I went back to Thailand, last time I was there was 2017. Wow, it's different. Nana is different. Lots of stuff are cleaned up. All the stuff that's blocking, like when you walk on the sidewalk, all that stuff is like, now you can walk freely for the most part. You see maybe a few beggars, but nothing like all the clutter, you know, all that clutter, where when you walk in and maybe you have to twist your body sideways to walk through the sidewalk and Nana. Nothing like that. A lot of stuff they're selling, a lot of the vendors are gone. I don't know how they're going to be making a living. And a lot of people who were cooking, some of them are on the side streets now. Like if you go down Soy 11, I think that's where the Ambassador Hotel is, where I stayed one time. That street was always busy. Now it's like, wow, you don't see the vendors. You go there in the night, 10 o'clock in the night, you can buy food. over there. Yeah. When I was there in 2015, and they had vendors and so forth, and somebody I met, she came and met me, and we sat down there, and she bought some food. She bought me, I think, a coconut water, and it was cluttered. When I went back in 2017, I didn't see those vendors on the same street. They were gone. Yeah, I think the king died in maybe 2016 or so forth. So when I went there in 2015, I don't think he had died. So it was all cluttered. But in 2016, he died. Son took over. Remarkable difference. Yeah, I don't think the people are too happy with that. So Germany has 127,218 Americans. Germany was kind of like quiet, like, you know, you're walking in Germany and it's like, wow. You look at, I took a ride in the Rhine River, and it's like, my goodness, I mean, imagine it, you know, Germany during the wartime. If I were walking in Germany during World War II, God, I'd sure be a prisoner. Look at this. This looks almost like a painting. Is it a painting or a real picture? Look at this. Percent of Americans abroad, 4.6%. Famous attraction, Heidelberg Castle in Heidelberg. That's in Bavaria. To get to there is not that easy. You gotta go on a ferry. See? So, Germany used to be made up of, like different kings. They had kingdoms. It wasn't like Germany is a whole country. And then Germany was brought together. What's his name there? Brought together, I think, in the 1800s and so forth. Yeah. So you had different kings, like King of Bavaria, different areas and so forth. They had their own kingdoms. That's how it was. Not one nation, as we know how Germany was like pre-World War II, and then of course it split up for a while, you know, until around I think 1991, when they came back and formed Germany, East and the West. Yeah. So let's see. Australia, fine. Well, Australia, they drive just like the British. They didn't give that up, you know. Speaking about driving, I read that the Canadians used to drive the same like the British on the left-hand side. However, being that they share a land border with the United States, they figure in the early days the smart thing to do was to switch to the right-hand side, because sooner or later they want to be driving into the United States. So that's how the Canadians end up driving on the right-hand side, not like the Australians and the people in New Zealand who drive on the left-hand side, like their British cousins in England and Wales and Scotland and so forth. Yeah, I was thinking the name I was looking for with Germany was Bismarck, von Bismarck. Bismarck, that name. Bismarck was the one that unified Germany. He brought Germany together. I think Otto von Bismarck. he brought Germany together, and Hitler caused it to split up many years later into East and West Germany. So 4.2% of American expats are living in Australia. That's a lot. 114,549 Americans. Famous attraction, Bondi Beach in Sydney. Alright, look at it. Bondi Beach, Sydney. I guess Sydney is the go-to place. That's the place that you see every New Year when they ring in the New Year on the show. They say Japan is the land of the rising sun, but when you look, they show fireworks out of Sydney, Australia. Israel is number 6. Look at that. We see the Israeli flag there. Looks nice. I've been to Lebanon, and so if you've been to Lebanon, if you've been to Israel, I don't think there's much of a difference, because Israel is south of Lebanon. They have a Mediterranean coast, and when I was over there in Lebanon, I stayed in Beirut. I went to some other parts like the Bekaa Valley and so forth. So it's an interesting place, but it could get cold too. Yeah, the temperature can drop there. It happens. But definitely you get that type of Mediterranean type feel. And I remember going down to the beach one time in Beirut. Look how beautiful this looks. Nice. It looks almost like, wow, too good to be true. Percent of Americans abroad, 2.8%. Not that many, right? Yeah, 76,904 Americans in Israel. Famous attraction, the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Okay, right there. I would think it's that wall, where people go to pray. That always shows up in Jerusalem, where people stand there and they write something in a piece of paper like a prayer, and they put it in a wall. I don't know if it's superstition. I don't know if it works. I want to know if anybody ever had any experience with that, writing something like a prayer, asking God for something, and you put it in a wall. If it comes true, wow, I like to hear about that. 7 is South Korea. Look at South Korea. It says coffee, HOF, beer, cocktail. Well, they're using some English there. So South Korea, that's 7 on the list. 67,819 Americans. Look at that, flowers up on the roof. I like that. Percent of Americans abroad, 2.5%. Famous attraction, Gyeongbok Palace in Seoul. Palace, yeah. They actually used to have an emperor in Korea. Of course, then the Japanese had annexed, not colonized so much, but annexed, which is way different. Annexed. They just made Korea part of Japan. Which is kind of crazy, to just annex. So and this was before World War II. Yeah. This was before. This was, I think, maybe going back pre-1920 or so forth when they did that. So the Japanese were very, very daring to pull off a stunt like that. Just like they did with Okinawa. Okinawa are different people. From what I read, uh, more friendly, more open to trade, whereas the Japanese were not really open to trading. Nope, they were not open to that. If you remember from American history, when I was in high school, they mentioned Commodore, I think it was Commodore Perry. I think Matthew Perry. He was sent over there to Tokyo Bay. And the first thing he did was shot a cannon into the air. And what they were doing, they wanted Japan to open up trade with the United States. And this was around in the 1860s or so. So Japan was like kind of like closed up. Not even like China. At least China used to be doing trading. But Japan was kind of closed. They didn't want to deal with anybody. And so Matthew Perry, Commodore Perry, he went in there with the U.S. Navy, shot a cannon into Tokyo Bay. And that kind of forced the Japanese into negotiation to open up trade. Isn't that something? And nowadays, the Japanese are like one of the world's most known trading people with all the stuff they sell. Maybe you can thank Matthew Perry for that. The American commander, Commodore Matthew Perry. So they forced them. And by the way, by then, even though Japan, it's an island, sets of islands, Japan had no navy in those days, which is amazing. They were surrounded by water. You would think if you're surrounded by water, the first thing you do to defend yourself would be to have a navy, right? But no, they had no navy. So when Perry came in with his ships in Tokyo Bay and shot a cannon, when you shoot a cannon, that means you could stay out in the water and you can blast people on land with a cannon. The Japanese had no choice but to sit down and talk. You see? That's how the world was back then. Now France is 8 on the list. Okay. And you see the river here. Down. Famous river. This is probably the Bastille prison. That's what I can think of, the Bastille prison. Yeah. 59,356 Americans. That's not that many Americans. Yeah, that's a small number. But when I was in France, I used to go to France like in the 1990s. Stay at a French lady's place. And I went and do my laundry, and I met Americans in there doing laundry in the laundromat. You go in there, not too far from where I stayed. Some Americans like living there. Some black Americans went to live there. Some who had problems here in the United States couldn't, back in the Jim Crow days and so forth, moved over there. Yeah. made a life for themselves. Were able to associate, go out in public, not have to worry about discrimination and all this stuff. It was different back then in France. Look at that. Percent of Americans abroad, 2.2%. Famous attraction, the Catacomb of Paris. Look at that. Wow. Skulls. Japan, number 9. We spoke of Japan before. And how they were like a closed society. They didn't really care about trading at the time. If you go back into the mid 1800s, not like China. At least China was doing some trading. And what's this? Percent of Americans abroad, 0.2%. Famous attraction, Mount Fuji in Fujiyama. Cold up there. Yeah, the north of Japan is very, very cold. And they actually got monkeys too. Monkeys out there by the hot springs. Italy, number 10. Nice. I think Italy was one of my favorite places when I was there in 1991. People seem to be friendly, much more friendly than in France, I would say, you know. I mean, really. Even though the Italians some Italians may struggle a bit, maybe it's different now because now you have all the technology and all the stuff if you want to translate things. But back then you didn't have all this technology, you know, where you could have like a phone in your hand and you can translate stuff like Google Translation. And wow, now it's really, really amazing to travel. But back then in 1991, you didn't have this stuff. So people trying to have a conversation with you, a little more difficult. But yeah, it's a fun place, especially when you go to Rome by the Trevi Fountain. Lots of people you see. And those steps, the Spanish steps. I heard you can't sit there anymore on the Spanish steps. It used to be people go there in the evening. As it's getting dark, you sit there in the Spanish steps. That was in the movie. And here's the Duomo. This is in Florence. I remember this because I was in Florence for a few days. I met up with an American who worked at the American University. That's what she said. And visited the Bubbly Gardens. I think that was the name of like one of those wealthy families from way back. Bubbly Gardens. Yeah, nice place. And when you're up there, you can look down and see the city. So that's Florence. This right here, the Duomo. So only 2% of Americans are born in Italy. Famous attraction, the Trevi Fountain in Rome. Yep. Where you throw coins in. I think if you throw coins in, it says you'll be back again. Yeah. You'll be back. Mm-hmm. 11, Spain. There it is. Spain is an interesting country too. I think in my travels going to like a European country, this is one of the countries where like a woman would come up to you and talk to you, if you're a man, that is. Whereas like in France, it'd be kind of much more different. Maybe they come to you and ask you a question, like where's the post office? No, yeah. Where's the post office? Le bureau du poste. But in Spain, they're much more easy going. Madrid, Barcelona, especially if you walk down Las Ramblas. 48,225 Americans. This looks like Barcelona here. And this. And Barcelona, at the end of the Ramblas, as you walk down toward the bay, you see there's a statue way up there of Christopher Columbus in his hand, and he's pointing out toward the ocean. But interestingly, in Spain, Christopher Columbus is not named Christopher Columbus. He's named Cristobal Colon. Or Cristobal Colon. Or Cristobal, I think. Maybe the accent is in the O. Cristobal Colon. So his name is Colon. Like Colon is one of those, common Spanish name here, at least where I live. So I don't know how the name Columbus came into being. But in Spain, he's known as Colon. Cristobal Colon, not Christopher Columbus. Famous attraction, Casa Batlló in Barcelona. Look at that. Nice. Bangladesh. Wow. I'm surprised Bangladesh is on the list. You wouldn't think. Maybe it's very cheap to live there. I remember with the show The Amazing Race, they had Bangladesh, and what I found interesting was that when you look at Bangladesh in the street, at least in Dhaka, the capital, you mostly just see men in the street. You don't see like a lot of women walking around. And I was kind of curious. Why is that? How come? And it's not, I don't think there's any kind of prohibition or anything like that, but they seem to have maybe a lot more men than women. So there are 46,614 Americans living there. Let's see right here. Americans abroad, 1.7%. And this is Bangladesh. Wow. I guess life must be very inexpensive living in Bangladesh. And the famous attraction is Bhagh Fort. Bhagh, B-A-G-H, Fort in Dhaka. Dhaka, of course, is the capital of Bangladesh. And that's a famous attraction right there. You know, it's much more impressive, I guess, than, what do you call it, when you go, Belgium, Brussels. You know, I saw somebody did one of his videos on Brussels. And I spent a few hours there. One time when I was in Paris, I went up, took the train up there, walked around. I didn't really see anything there. But according to this guy, he said the only thing that seemed interesting in Brussels is a little boy peeing, a statue of a little boy peeing. That's about it. He said, however, if you travel on, maybe Antwerp and other places like that in Belgium, yeah, you're going to find some interesting things. But if you go to Brussels, you're not going to really find anything interesting there. So I'm looking at this building in Dhaka. And this is much better than the statue of a little boy peeing, in my opinion. Switzerland. Switzerland is nice too, but an expensive country. When I did my tour in 1991, I stopped in Switzerland, stayed in Zurich, and was able to travel by train, to the French-speaking side, and Lucerne and so forth. And the taxis, all the taxis were like Mercedes-Benz. That's what I remember. I look at the taxis, Mercedes-Benz. So that's what I took away from it. And of course, chocolates and so forth. 39,304 Americans. I guess more like sophisticated Americans. I think Tina Turner, she lives there. I think she became a Swiss citizen. They have lots of mountain slopes for skiing and so forth. That's interesting. Percent of Americans abroad, 1.4%. Famous attraction, the Rhine Falls on the High Rhine. So they speak German in Zurich. And if you go down to what the south, where the United Nations is, they speak French. And I think there's another language called Romansh, probably made up from Latin and something else that they speak in a part of Switzerland. But French and German, those are the two major languages.
Things have changed and we need to talk.
This photo, I thought it was private. It's time to reset your relationship with the internet. Avast helps you take control of your safety.
Now we get to 14, the Philippines. Wow. That's where the guys on the bamboo raft. 36,683 Americans. Really, that's all?
This photo, I thought it was private.
I get the impression there are more Americans living there in the Philippines because of the American bases in the past and so forth. Access to healthcare if you're a veteran. I think you can go to Clark, maybe Clark Air Base. So this is the Philippines. Percent of Americans abroad, 1.3%. Famous attraction, Chocolate Hills in Bohol Province. Yep, those are worth it.
Thank you for coming, Internet.
You go down there, you see like little small mountains and the color is brown. That's why they call it Chocolate Hills. First time I was there was in 2005. So that's like 16 years ago. A long time. That was my, there it is, right there. See? Very unusual. Look at the shape. The chocolate hills. I really like that part of the Philippines. You know, it's really calm. There's like Panglao Island, not too far. But Bohol is nice. It's like country-like living, like setting. You see hibiscus flowers, all these bougainvillea plants, flowers, all that stuff. Ireland. Woo, cold place. I saw a lady, I don't know, one of those documentaries, I think. A lady from the Philippines, she married somebody and she was living in Ireland and she was basically on a farm. I don't think she felt too happy. I think if she had seen the Philippines out her front door, she would jump back into it. Ireland, you know, Ireland and like maybe parts of England, you gotta be really from there to really love it. Cold and damp and cloudy and so forth. You have to really be from that part of the world to like it. So 33,693 Americans living there. Look at that. Oh, percent of Americans abroad, 1.2%. Famous attraction, Dublin Castle. Yeah. Ireland used to have a king too. And then you had Cromwell. William Cromwell went in when after they got rid of their monarchy in England for a while. There was Cromwell. Cromwell. That's a name that probably doesn't sit too well with the British. He took over and he did a devastating job on the Irish. Really horrible job on the Irish people. Now you have the Netherlands, number 16. That's the Netherlands right there. 32,596 Americans. That's one country, if you go to, you don't really have to worry about trying to translate anything because the average person you're going to meet on the street from the Netherlands will speak some English and speak English well too. Probably better than some people here in America. That was my experience when I was there. These countries, they tend to be multilingual, so they don't only speak one language. Like I read something that countries that usually speak like one language are like the British, the English. They're usually known for speaking one language, not like, you know, speaking different languages or so forth. Like Anthony Eden, one of the former prime minister, he used to speak French. I saw him in one of those old World War II, the World at War. He speak French. But I had a brother-in-law there, and he told me, you know, if you hear a British person speaking like French in England, that means he's showing off. That's about what he said, you know. So if you see a British person there in England speaking in French, he's showing off. However, the same can be said in France. If you see somebody in France speaking English, that's not really showing off. That's like trying to express themselves to get the point across. And also, like, New Zealand and Australia, those countries also, they tend to be monolingual. They're not known for like speaking other languages. Of course, to the north we have the Canadians, and Canada has like two different languages, French and English. And one part of it, I guess had to do with when the French were there. And the British took over, and they didn't give up because they never really cared for the British anyway. They never gave up. They never gave up their language, their culture, what have you. And they're very stubborn to it. The French is old. Many years ago, I was there with some people from New York, and back then we saw this young girl, doing some crazy stunts, and she was on skateboards, Back then, in those days, that was kind of crazy. Now, with what people do with skateboards now that I see even in the Olympics, that's not crazy now because it's different now, but back then, you didn't really see that kind of stuff. Now you see it, like these people, they go on skateboard, they flip over. She was doing some crazy stuff, and in those days, that was like, wow, you're gonna hurt yourself, you're gonna like fall and you're gonna hit your head, maybe be paralyzed. And we told her, wow, be careful, And she said to us in English, she said, speak to me in French. I always remember that. She said, speak to me in French. I do not speak English. Just like that she said. So we were trying to tell her, be careful, you're going to hurt yourself. And her answer was, speak to her in French. I do not speak English. And her English was just as good. And that's how they are. That's how they are. Years ago when I worked with the federal government, and I was sent up at the border. And I was in, I think it's called, what's that, Lewiston? Right there, where you come over you come down from, I think, Toronto or so forth, and you cross the bridge, you come over, I believe it's Lewiston. And the truckers and one of the customs people told me, she said, and this conversation came up. She said that some of the people, they don't want to speak any English because they would ask them back in those days, it wasn't like now, now you need like, I think a passport to cross. Back then, all you need is verbally say, So she would ask, what's your citizenship? So, these guys driving the trucks, more than likely they may be Canadian, like from Quebec, that part. And when you ask, what's your citizenship? They don't answer. They don't speak English. And she would tell them, go park over there. That's what she told me. And they parked the truck. And after a while, they figure, you know what? Time is money. Instead of being stubborn, let me get going down the road. After a while, they come back to her, and they will answer in English what their citizenship is, which is Canadian, French Canadian. And then she will let them on their way. So this is how stubborn these people are. That they don't want to use English at all. They're stuck with that attitude that, no, I'm not going to use English. Why should I? It's not my language. I'm not going to use it. Yeah. So that's what you get. Some of them constantly will not speak any word. Celine Dion, I read that up until about the age of 19, she didn't speak any English, living in Canada. She didn't speak, and Canada is bilingual. I mean, it's up to you if you want, you know, I'm sure they teach English in the school. They say she didn't speak any English whatsoever. But however, someone told her, look, you know, you live in Canada. Canada doesn't really have a lot of people. I mean, it's a big country, but a small population, right? Like about 35 million now. Maybe less than when she was 19 years old. And if you sing in French, well, you know, the people in France, they sure don't care about your music because that's how the people in France are. If you think your French is good, no. Wait till you get to France and see how they carry on. Like a guy who I worked with, he said when he went to high school, he studied French. He was excited. He went to France. He was in Paris. He's practicing his French. And it was like, oh my goodness. The French people looked at him like, wow. You know, like, oh my goodness, you can't speak proper French. He said he was taken aback. You know, so the French are very, very difficult people because in some other countries, like, you go to like Thailand or, you know, maybe even like down in Mexico, you speak a few words in their language, like with Thai people, they'll be so happy. They'll say, wow, you make them happy just to hear, you know, like a friend say, oh wow, you're speaking my language, you're speaking Thai, and you're just saying sabadi, like sabadi roo. And they just hear that and they feel so good that you took the time to learn that. Whereas with the French, if you speak it and you don't put the accent in the right place, it's like, you know that sound like chalk on the blackboard, and it makes that noise like when you were back in class and the teacher was writing, and then all of a sudden it, you know, kind of like pressed the wrong way in the chalk, and it's like irritating. That's how the French come across. It's like, because with the French language, you got all these different, like, you know, the accent point and so forth. So unlike in English we don't have that. English, you have natural accent. That's why English has so many different pronunciations. But the French, they got like accent either going to the right, accent going to the left, or maybe straight up. And that's really, really difficult. And the French, they're not going to accommodate you and say, oh, you know, it's very nice of you to learn some French. No, it's like, no, you're irritating me. Oh, my goodness, you know, where did you learn that? No, that's not the way. So he said he felt like, wow, you know, that's how it is. So getting back to Celine Dion realized that, wow, well, okay, you speak in French, but definitely your music ain't going to be really make it in France, okay? If you can sing well, the way you can make money singing is in America. Your neighbors down to the south. And that's when she learned English. And then all of a sudden, you know, she's singing and she's performing in Las Vegas and she's rich. And her husband helped and so forth. Became multi-millionaire, rich woman. You see? So that's the way, you know. If you want to do it, you come down to America. You come down to America. You sing in English or what have you. Hey, people, if they like your music, you'll be famous. And that's what Celine Dion did. See? Who didn't even know English at the age of 19. So, famous attraction here in Amsterdam. Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam South. China, 17. Let's see, 28,223 Americans. I've seen videos of people living in China. Some of them say, well, China is not expensive to live in China, like for food and so forth. You can get cheap food. However, now you have like the price of like housing, and that's kind of difficult now. And they also mentioned crime. You don't have the kind of crime like in America, the kind of stuff we have going on in America. You know, whereby you worry about walking down the street. You don't really have that. You have crazy incidents that happen, like sometimes people go stabbing a whole bunch of people at a train station and so forth, or at a school. But the kind of like random crime, gun violence, the kind of stuff that plagues us, like in New York City, for example, you see all these videos of people. Even today, one man was stabbed this morning, after 1 in the morning, on the train, I think the number 2 train. Stabbed in the neck and died at Bellevue Hospital. You know, he was in the train, was a passenger. I don't think he was even dealing with the other person. So this is the kind of risk you take here, you know, especially in a place like New York. People have weapons, people, you know, you have no choice but to be in their space. And then we have all these guns here, and we have people from other states who believe that it's the right to have all these guns. So, like the guy who got off, who killed 2 men and shot another one, and the jury let him go. In New York, where I live, he will never get off for like something like that. That's not, because we won't see that as self-defense. We see self-defense as you have to have like an equal, appropriate response, you know? Like, if somebody walk into you and hits you with his hand, and you take out a gun and shoot him dead, that's not an appropriate response. And that's what happened there in that case. It has to be, from what I know, is that you have to have like a certain relative response, similar. You can't have much more of a dramatic response and say that's self-defense. No. It has to be proportional, if I'm going to use that word, proportional. Not like that. And that's what's unfortunate. You see. Okay. So here is China. Attraction, the Forbidden City in Beijing. That's the attraction. So I mentioned earlier Japan, and Japan with its closed policy and trading, and you know, Commodore Perry went in there, shut his cannon in Tokyo Bay, opened up trade. Whereas China was very, very different. China was doing trading, yeah. Silk, China ware, all sorts of goods. However, China was not willing to engage in fair trade. Sound familiar? And we're talking about back in the 1800s, like 1860s and so forth. So China was not willing to engage in fair trade. So that means ships would bring goods to Europe, dump a lot of stuff the Europeans buy, and then the ships would go back empty. That's not fair, right? Because you have goods too. You want to sell. The Europeans have goods they want to sell. And China wouldn't buy. China is still China like that. If they can get away with it, they still do the same thing, whereby they want to sell to the world, but they don't want to buy from the world. So what happened, you had the British, the French, and then the British decide, well, okay, you don't want to buy from us, then we're going to engage in the opium. We're going to sell opium to people. Sounds crazy, but that's what happened. So you had the opium wars, and they were actually bringing in opium as a way to trade. Now, just like how we have it in modern day America, people buying drugs like cocaine and you know, meth, methamphetamine and so forth. Americans seem to love drugs, right? Or even the legal ones, the opiums. Same with the Chinese back then. They love opium and they love to smoke it. And there wasn't really much that the Chinese can do back then under the Qing dynasty. So when they fought back, well, that gave an excuse, you know. That gave an excuse for the British to fight them with their ships and come in, and the French and so forth. So you had like the Opium Wars, like maybe about 2 different type events where they engage in the Opium Wars, and this all had to do with trade. And eventually, of course, the Chinese lost, and because they lost, they had to pay like reparation. And one of that is like Hong Kong. Hong Kong was leased to the British for over 99 years. Yeah, that's how come the British. But the British did a very good job in making Hong Kong a successful city. Yeah, with banking and so forth. Yeah. Now Hong Kong, I don't know about Hong Kong now, but that China took over and they turned in their laws and everything upside down. And the Portuguese were in Macau. The French were also there. The Germans had a port, I think, in east part of China. Japanese were also in there. I believe, Shanghai was controlled by foreigners at one point. So that was the story, and that's what the China call the century of humiliation, and that's what they teach in their schools about how they were humiliated, and that's one of the reasons China is so arrogant today, because they look at their history and they look at how they were taken advantage of. You know, they had all these foreign powers coming in, trying to force their people to use drugs, and then beat them down, and then they have to give in and concede, pay concessions, and had their land taken over for a long time. In the case of the British, 99 years and more, I think. Then they gave it back in 1997. So you will never hear the end of the Chinese talking about the century of humiliation. However, they have no problem in engaging in some of the same kind of malfeasance, like spraying water on the Filipino fishermen who been fishing in their ancestral homelands for years, you know, like hundreds of years the Filipinos been fishing in those waters. And all of a sudden, China is claiming those areas as part of China. You know, I mean, really now. When China was a weak country, they never claimed that, right? All of a sudden, you're powerful now, you have all this military, and you see President Xi standing there in the open with the military. In America, we don't do that. You don't see the President of the United States standing in a military truck with military hardware. We don't show off like that. But in China, they do. You know? In China, they do. Like how North Korea is standing there in a military truck, Xi. So Xi is like the new emperor of China. And showing off and showing the might and reminding the Chinese people about the century of humiliation. And they will keep repeating that over and over and over. The century of humiliation. And it's like, here we are today. We are powerful. So the Chinese people should feel good about themselves to see how far they came. Now, we're down to 18, Ecuador. Ecuador is an affordable country, I guess. Ecuador. It sits right on the equator. That's what that means. Ecuador. 26,386 Americans, and it's very elevated, high up there. Percent of Americans living abroad there, 1%. Famous attraction, the Cotopaxi volcano in the Andes Mountains. See that? Andes Mountains. Latacunga City. Peru, number 19. Peru is high up there too, like Lima, Peru. 26,369 Americans. Yeah. Look at that. I've never been there. Maybe in the future I can take a trip there. So percent of Americans abroad, 1%. 26,369 Americans living there. Famous attraction, the Machu Picchu in the eastern Cordillera. Machu Picchu. Brazil. Look at Brazil. This is Rio right there. That's the character for Jesus Christ right there. As you come into Rio, see that? 23,726 Americans living there. Look at this. The beaches. Percent of Americans abroad, 0.9%. Famous attraction, Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro. Look at that. And that's a religious statue, and that's the famous attraction there in Rio. 21, New Zealand. Okay, we mentioned New Zealand before. They, along with Australia, England, those are the countries tend to speak one language. 22,922 Americans living in New Zealand. Percent of Americans abroad, 0.8%. Famous attraction, Hobbiton movie set, a movie set in Waikato. Wow, Waikato. Then you have Sweden. Never been up there. Sweden, which is right next to Norway. Wow, that's way up there. It's funny, people talk about the time here, you know, when we change the clock back, and people say, wow, you know, we should just leave things the way it is because it's getting so dark. But believe me, if you live up there, for certain times of the year, it's gonna be dark, real dark, for much of the day. If you live up in Sweden and Norway, so for Americans who complain about the clock being turned back, well, try living in Norway or Sweden, up in the northern part, by the Arctic Circle. Percent of Americans abroad, 0.8%. Famous attraction, the Ice Hotel in the village of, what's this? Jukaskavi. Am I pronouncing that right? Jukaskavi. Ice Hotel. It's actually a hotel. And you, what is it? You sleeping on ice? That's interesting. Greece, number 23. Well, Greece has a lot of history. I've never been there. One of those ancient places. Lots of Lots of history to get into. They don't play a role like they used to, like how Spain used to be. You know, at one time Greece was very powerful. Percentage of Americans abroad, 0.8%. Yeah, that's not that many. Famous attraction, the Acropolis of Athens. So that's interesting right there. Look at that. So I believe Macedonia is part of Greece, modern Greece, right? Macedonia. I believe that's where Alexander the Great came out of, and as you know, he just about conquered a good bit of the ancient world, like Greece, going into areas of what's known as the Middle East, Lebanon, and so forth, except for Afghanistan. He wasn't able to conquer Afghanistan. Just like it is today. The British were not able to conquer Afghanistan. They left maybe one soldier walking out. The Soviets were not able to do it. And lastly here, the Americans were not able to do it. Had to leave Afghanistan. So there's something about Afghanistan. Even Alexander the Great, as great as he was, wasn't able to conquer Afghanistan. Chile. Okay, this country is like kind of like hidden, like it's faces the Pacific Ocean, and it comes all the way down. I think the way the Atlantic and the Pacific meet. Yeah, all the way down there, next to Argentina. 20,278 Americans living there. And the capital, of course, is Santiago. That's some cable cars there. Percent of Americans living abroad, 0.7%. Attraction, the marble caves of Patagonia. Yep, yeah, Patagonia. That's like way down there. Colombia, 25 on the list. Hmm. 20,140 Americans. This street looks so picturesque and colorful. Look at this. It almost looks like a painting. Yeah. The flowers. So beautiful. Percent of Americans abroad, 0.7%. Famous attraction, the Sol Cathedral of Zipaquirá. Zipaquirá. Guam, 26. Guam. 19,421 Americans on Guam. Look at this. Percent of Americans, 0.7%. Famous attraction, underwater world. Wow. You can actually play it here. There's a video right there. But I'm not gonna do that. Norway. There's Norway. We mentioned Norway before. It gets dark there. in the winter, June, and that lasts for many, many hours. And in the summer, you have a lot of sun. Look at that village, how beautiful it looks. Percent of Americans abroad, 0.7%. Famous attraction, Choltonga in Westland County. Turkey, 28 on the list. 18,435 Americans. Turkey is an interesting country because it used to have Constantinople was the capital. Istanbul now. It was named Constantinople, and they divided up the Roman Empire into the east and west, Rome and Constantinople. And Turkey, of course, one part of it is in Asia and one part of it is in Europe. And people often take that boat to go from one continent to another in a short time. So that's an interesting country to visit. Famous attraction, Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul. '29, South Africa. Okay. 17,763 Americans. Percent of Americans abroad, 0.6%. And when you get down there to South Africa, they're very, very, very cool, very nice. You can grow apples, grapes, all this kind of stuff. Okay. Famous attraction, Kruger National Park in Limpopo and Mpumalanga provinces. Look at it. And Hong Kong makes number 30. Hong Kong, 17,166 Americans. Hong Kong is an interesting place. Of course, they drive on the left-hand side, just like the British. When the British were there, they colonized the place, and they really built it up, made it into a banking center in the world. I was there years ago. Met up with some people from Hong Kong. At the time, they really enjoy living there. One of them contrasts back then how life is in Hong Kong versus like mainland China at the time. This was 2005, so this was like 16 years ago, and much has changed since then to how life is now. Look at this. Hong Kong. There's a Victoria Park there. You can take like a cable car and go up there. Famous attraction, Hong Kong Disney in Penny's Bay. When I was there, no, there was no Disney. Lantu Island. Disney. Okay, so that's it. So we have, that's the end of the list here. 30. So, I try to give at least 2 minutes on each. That will come up to like 60 minutes. Bring me a little over an hour. So, I'm over an hour, and then I had a lot of commentary I was giving. So, it's like an hour and 19 minutes. I spent on this. But anyway, this is something that most people, well, people who want to travel out may be curious about. So now we know. You see the places where a American expats tend to go. Number, a certain amount in the thousand, I guess over 1,000 at least. So this is where they live, in different parts of the world. Oh, I hope you enjoy that, because I wasn't really familiar with these countries, and I think most people are not.